correct?
Yes, I joined the Air Force in February 1970, right out of high school, basically. I waited about a year, I guess, before I joined. Didn't know what I wanted to do in college, so I figured instead of wasting my parents' money and so forth, I'd go ahead and join. Back then we had the lottery, which means your birthday came up with a number, and when your number came up, you were drafted. My number was around 122, I think. And when it got to be about 110, I realized, did I want to go in the Marines and Army and carry a weapon, or did I want to try to go in the Air Force and do support my country that way? So I decided to join the Air Force. It was kind of strange how I got in. I went to the courthouse, the recruiter's office, and originally I heard the Navy had pretty good food. So I went to the Navy recruiter's office, and he had been to lunch, so I had to come back. But the Air Force recruiter next door was there, so I went in there, and he said, well, there's a lot of guys in your situation are on verge of getting drafted, but I'll give you the battery of tests. They give you a battery test before you go in to see where they want to place you if you're selected. So I took the battery of tests and everything, and he told me he'd give me a call if something came up, and so I went home and just crossed my fingers because I really wanted to go in a service like the Air Force or Navy in a support rather than hand-to-hand combat kind of thing. So I went home, and 2 days later I got a phone call, and it was from the Air Force recruiter. And he told me that one of the guys that had signed up flunked the physical because he had asthma. So he wanted to know if I was willing to go in, and I said, sure. So from the time I met with him until the time I went in was about 2 days, and I was down in Chicago taking my physical, and the next thing I know, within a week, I'm in the Air Force. So, and shipped off to, San Antonio for basic training. And from there, I went to tech school after basic training in Denver, Colorado, and that's where they do all their photo reconnaissance training. And I really fell in love with Denver when I was there, and I thought, well, if I get a chance when I get out of the service, I'd really like to go back to Denver. So that's basically how I got in and went to tech school. And right out of tech school, I got my orders for Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon, which is 1970, November of 70s when I went in to Vietnam. So.
What was that like telling your family, hey, I'm heading off to Vietnam?
It was rough. I mean, we had a pretty close family. Our family was all located around, that Northwest Indiana area, and so leaving home was rough. I wasn't used to that, and I'd never been on a plane before, to tell you the truth. And after I finished, or after I got onto the Chicago and everything, they put me on a plane for the first time to San Antonio for basic training, and here I am on a plane and never been on a plane, so that was a unique experience too. And I was 19 at the time, and then getting back to me going to Vietnam, I got my orders and had a couple weeks before I went, and ended up reporting to Travis Air Force Base to go over to Vietnam, and I think it was about right before Thanksgiving, November 22nd of 1970. So got on a plane, World Airlines is this charter, a bunch of GIs on the plane and everything. And it took us 2 stops before we landed in Saigon. We left San Francisco, went up to Fairbanks, Alaska, and then from Fairbanks over to Japan, Yokota, Japan, and then down to Tan Son Nhut. And I remember leaving in November from Chicago, and had winter blues on basically, and arriving at Tan Son Nhut, and it was 90 degrees. So here I am in a wool suit and just about sweating to death, because of the fact that I'm landing in a humid area and stuff that was really hot. So it was really a different experience for me that way too. So.
What was your day-to-day life like?
What I do? Let me get back a little bit to when I first got in. when I first got in, they send you to an in-country induction orientation, and I went to that, and I remember right next to it was our base chapel, and to start things off, the base chapel got blew up by a rocket the day before I got there. So here I am thinking, oh my gosh, I guess I'm here. You know, it was kind of not real in a way. And so I went through orientation and everything, and then after that, I was assigned to a unit. The 12th RITS was Recon Intelligence Technical Squadron. I was really fortunate in a way because we had processed film and everything to be basically looked at by photo interpreters, and then they would target different areas and stuff depending on where the Viet Cong were, and then they would go back and do their bombing missions and stuff. So I was really fortunate being in war that I actually had a kind of a desk job, but it wasn't boring by any means because we were always getting rockets and mortar attacks and stuff on the base. So it took me about 2 months before I got off base. And finally, a buddy of mine came up and said, you got to do something. You know, you're going to go nuts if you stay on base for a year. And we had a 1-year tour. So finally, I went down to Saigon with him and stuff, and drank a beer, those kind of things, and just, you know, let my hair down a little bit and stuff. And finally, once I decided to do that, a lot of the fear went away, because I just said to myself, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. You know, you can't just worry about it all the time. I had a unique way of dealing with the stress. I was able to go to bed at night and dream I was somewhere else, which is, you know, I talk to people about this a lot and everything, and they say, you're really fortunate you could do that. But for some reason, God was watching over me, and that's how he helped me cope with the stress of war, was just to basically dream when I was sleeping at night and not even think about where I was. So that helped me get through the year I was over there.
What are some of the, I mean, you talked about getting off the base at one time. What are some of the other good things that you remember from your service over there that year?
The fortunate thing too is a lot of people that were in the Army and the Marines and those kind of people, Navy, they'd actually come to Saigon for an in-country R&R, which was a 3-day R&R. So I kind of felt fortunate that I was actually in an area they were coming to get some rest, you know. So some of the things we had a base theater, which is really nice in a combat zone because you can watch movies and let your mind get away from it that way. They had a real neat thing that was called mosquito flicks. So once a week, they would have a big, like 10 sheets of plywood up on some stakes and with painted whitewash, and they would get movies from the, I think, I'm not sure where they got the movies, but they would show full-length movies outside. That's why they call them mosquito flicks. So we would be able to do that once a week too. And I remember Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is one of the movies that we watched. It just came out when I was over there. Some of the other things that I enjoyed doing, they had some really nice restaurants there actually in Vietnam. I always thought that it's a shame they have a war going on here, because if they don't, it would have been a nice place really to visit. And I haven't been back, but I've always thought it'd be nice just to go back for a while and see what it's like. I've gone on Google Maps and everything, and things have really changed, you know, since 1971. And so I'm sure I probably wouldn't recognize it, but it'd still be nice to see some of the people there and everything, because I got to know a couple people over there that were locals too by going downtown. And they would just work in the town itself and just talking to them and everything, and they were really friendly people.
What was it like when what was it like when the rockets were starting to go off in Europe at the base?
Oh, the first thing we had to do, they spent a lot of money on us, you know, for background investigation and stuff, because I had a high clearance. So they told us if they had a siren that went off if we were under attack, was to report back to where we worked, because we worked in a building similar to this, which was about 2 foot of concrete, like a big bunker, actually. So when we went in there, we felt fairly safe. And there was only one time I was issued my M16. They said that the enemy had broke through the main gate, and it was scary. I mean, it really was. I won't beat around the bush. I mean, I don't wish that experience on anybody, actually. It's a shame that I had to go through that, and a lot of people had gone through that. But I feel very fortunate that I was able to serve my country and come back and not have any disabilities or still be around to talk about it. I was just out front here, and I asked anybody if anybody from the Air Force is here today. And they said, Air Force, what's that? They had it pretty rough in the Marines and the Army. Like I said, I feel fortunate, but I knew that volunteering and being in the service for 4 years was probably going to be a lot easier than being a draftee and being in for 2 and being on the front line.
What are some of the, I guess, what was your welcome home like?
There wasn't any. I mean, the veterans now, I really am glad they're received the way they are. The hardest part for any Vietnam veteran you talk to is the fact that we weren't recognized the way that the veterans are now. I mean, walking through the airport and stuff, it wasn't a good experience, but it wasn't a horrible experience. I've heard of other veterans that have been, went through a lot coming back and stuff, but there was no fanfare, none at all.
What did you do the first thing? What was the first thing you did when you did get back to the States?
After I got off the plane, got in a car. Actually, an ex-girlfriend picked me up, and riding down the interstate at 65 miles an hour was a scary experience because I had not been in a car going 65 miles an hour for a year. And I remember just doing this kind of thing like a dentist chair, and I could equate it to having my teeth drilled on. It's almost like you sit on the edge of and oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going this fast. I went home. Of course, my mom and dad were really happy to see me. My mom and family communicated with me while I was over there with cassette tapes, tapes. So they would speak into these tapes and stuff and send them to me, and then I'd listen to them and just use the same tape and record over it and send it back, my experience over there. And one of the things I wish I would have done is saved the tapes and bought new tapes, because I would have documentary more of what I went through over there on these tapes, but I only have one, the last one I made. Some of the other things I did, I remember my first 4th of July. It was rough. I mean, even though I wasn't out in the field, it's still rough, because with rockets and mortars and stuff, it sounds just like the 4th of July. And yeah, the first one was rough. I can't remember a lot of other things. Kind of that first year after I got back, I don't remember a lot of. It's almost like I was just getting past what I just went through. So if you ask me day to day what I did, I probably don't know. It's just a recovery kind of period.
When did you feel like you were able to finally share your story and talk about your service?
Oh, let's see. Probably about 10 years ago, or maybe more than that, 20 years ago. Actually, when Audrey and I got married 23 years ago, I had a feeling of comfort like I hadn't had for a long time. And I was able to talk about things like that, where before, you can't, the way I think about it is you can't really talk to somebody what you went through and have them appreciate it unless they went through it too. Any veteran, I think, is like that that's been in war. You know, you can imagine what they go through, but you don't know until you're there. I mean, it's not only physical, it's psychological. The people that are crippled and stuff are constantly reminded of what they went through and stuff. And like I said, I'm fortunate that that didn't happen to me. And I really honor the people that gave their lives and parts of their body to defend this country. I mean, that's the ultimate sacrifice. I mean, and I'll always appreciate that.
What is the, I know we got the replica small one here, but what is that wall in DC mean?
Yeah, we were there a couple of years ago. I broke down. I did. Just to see all the people that are no longer with us because of war. My father served in World War II, and he never talked to me about it a lot. He just told me, he was in the Seabees, or not the Seabees, but the Corps of Engineers with the Army. And he was in France, and a funny thing that happened, Audrey and I went on vacation when we went to France, and my dad says, "Why do you want to go there?" And I said, "Well, Dad, there's no war going on anymore. You know, we look forward to going to France now." And I think in my father's mind, he'll always remember France as the war he went through, you know. And I hope that I don't do that when I go to Vietnam. I hope I can enjoy it for the beauty and the beauty of the people there.
Did you ever get a chance to talk with your father to actually really get into what he went through?
I tried sometimes. He's no longer with us. He would just tell me bits and pieces. We were about the same age, I think, when he went in the Army back in the 40s, 1940s. And I wish I would have asked him more. I really do. Now that he's gone, the unfortunate thing is I can't do that anymore. So.